Good evening and welcome to the Overview and Scrutiny panel for Environment, Communities and Partnerships on Thursday the 3rd of April. Starting with the agenda, have we got any apologies?
So we have apologies this evening from Councillors Criswell, Cadaway, McAdam, Mockwell and Tevlin.
Thank you. Item 1, the minutes. Approving the minutes from last meeting. Is everyone happy with them? So item 2, members' interests. Has anyone got any interest to disclose? Nope. Oh, hang on. Councillor Hunt.
I don't believe it's necessary, but I am a ward member for Huntingdon in relation to item 7.
Okay. Are we moving straight to item 4? We're doing the working programme.
We'll do this as the third one.
Yeah. Moving on to item 3, overview, scrutiny and working programme. Everyone happy with the programme? Anyone want to comment on it or add anything to it? Councillor Shaw.
Not strictly add anything to it. I was just curious if there was any more takers for the climate working group at all.
Obviously, Councillor Hassel has expressed interest, and that is the additional name that I've had so far. We can look at taking that to a 5-person group instead of 6-person if that would be preferable, and then we'll just sort of, there's no meeting scheduled in at the moment, we're just sort of looking at the next course of work, but we'll add that in. I think that should work. So if there's any issues, obviously I'll communicate that back. The only other thing to note on the work programme, just as an additional, there is a possibility of creating a food waste small group to look at the communications plan for the incoming food waste section. So what I think I'll do, as not everybody's here tonight, if I send that round by email to you all for expressions of interest, and then we can move that forward given that not everybody's here, and then you can come back to me on email about that, as that's something that we can then put in to look at the communications plan, which is something that you'd previously asked for, if that's okay with everyone. Councillor Bywater.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Good evening, everybody. Community safety partnerships, I mentioned it about getting on the agenda. Can you just give us an update, please?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Bywater. So we had a number of topics come forward from that workshop we did with the whole panel, and that's one of the topics that we've got on the anvil to bring forward. There's a number of other ones as well, and I think you'll notice looking forward on the plan, there are some gaps. So one of the things we'll be picking up through the chair is which of those items we bring forward. Community safety partnerships is pretty near the top from my perspective on that, so we should be able to bring that forward at future meetings.
Anyone else with any comments? And Councillor Hassel.
Yeah, just picking up on that last comment, do you know what the first of our selected proposed items to the agenda is likely to come through?
So I think we'll work through with Chair and Vice Chair on that. That was, if you recall, the kind of flowchart we put forward around the source the topics from this group, work with the Chair to prioritise those, and we've had those engagements with group leaders as well. I don't want to commit to a particular topic yet, but the ones that we talked through, which are on the anvil, community safety partnership is one, the work around the Hinchinbrook Hospital and the developments in that activity is another. We've got some stuff around the Right to Grow activity that was brought forward by yourself, Councillor Hassel, and there's also some work around the community health and wealth strategy. Members will recall that one of the recommendations that was signed off by Council on that was to get your involvement in the grant scheme and to help us form up the potential to sit around that. And that is something I'm looking forward to bring forward in the summer. I suspect in either June or July is my time scale. So we'll come back to you. We've got those 4 or 5 items that we'd look to work through and bring forward. And further to that, there's also an item which will come forward, we think, in July, which is connected to the climate strategy and our delivery around that activity, which will be a meeting that you will give input before it goes to Cabinet.
Chair, if I may just come back, just noting I joined this committee back in May, and so we're just almost coming up to 12 months, and so far I don't think a member of this committee has actually managed to put anything onto the agenda. So appreciate that there's lots of thought going around and so on and so forth, but it does feel like we're not fully in control of the committee, and yeah, Chair, Vice Chair should really be setting the agenda. And yeah, I would really like to see the topics put forward by members to be uppermost on the agenda, because I think that's the purpose of this committee. I'm seeing nods from around the other members. So can we get some reassurance that we'll at least have one of the topics on the next ONS?
As an officer, it's not my decision over that. It's through chair and vice chair, but I'm sure we could work through all those activities, but I defer to chair and vice chair on that.
Yes, that's a yes from me. Any other comments before we move on to the next item? Okay, item 4, outstanding responses from the previous meeting. I've read in the agenda the responses. Anyone got any comments on those? Councillor Shaw?
Not strictly a comment as such. I just thought it was quite a nice touch to put that in the report. You know, it's far from perfect, but I think it just gives us visibility on a response from our recommendations. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Alban?
Yeah, on a similar vein, Chair, I think it's useful and reassuring. I think one of my frustrations and the frustrations of others in years before, we've said things, we've said our piece, we felt better about it, and never heard anything again. But now we're getting feedback, and I think that's useful and encouraging.
It is. Thank you. So moving on to item 5, CPE update and off-street parking places order. We're going to comment on the update, and we've got George and Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. Good to be back. I was missing you all. Okay, so you have this report in front of you, and it's the activity to deliver civil parking in Huntingdonshire, which began, as you know, with the previous administration. However, it still remains one that I am really, really committed to. And I'm pleased to say that we are, fingers crossed, nearing the finish line. This evening's report presents an updated parking order that supports bringing our own cars, parks under the civil parking enforcement as well. As I've commented before, we will be looking at to review our car parking strategy. The scope of the strategy needs to be fully defined, but I anticipate looking at, amongst other things, how the car park, this is really important, how car parks support the use of our towns, our market towns. As we know, majority of our car parks are in our market towns. Pricing principles that we consider when we look at the charges, as these have already previously set out in the previous strategy that's now outdated, and the use of the car parks, including the impact of the what CPE could bring. Work on scoping this strategy has commenced, and we will be looking to bring forward the strategy as soon as possible in the current financial year. I look forward to sharing the draft of the strategy as it emerges and we progress with it. But focusing on now, we continue to work towards the CPE implementation and the actions to support this. So tonight's paper is one of those steps. So I'll hand over to George to give a more detailed brief on it. Thank you.
Good evening, councillors. So this evening we brought forward a paper relating to civil parking enforcement. As we've discussed in previous papers, the pursuit of CPE creates both a civil and special enforcement area across the district. An impact of this is a legislative change that it also brings that extends to our car parks. Parking orders are the documents that govern our off-street car parks, and a revised parking order that reflects this legislative change has been presented, which we are seeking progress to establish. We're seeking a delegated authority tonight as well for the Corporate Director for Place to make and confirm future off-street parking places orders and changes not relating to charges. As CPE may change parking behaviours, we consider it a proactive step to enable us to update the order to address issues should they arise. And finally, tonight we're noting the Cambridgeshire County Council enforcement policy and operational guidance. Under the agency agreement we entered into in 2024, we recognise this document of the Highways Authority as it applies to all areas of Cambridgeshire under CPE. So tonight we're inviting comments of the panel on the recommendations of the paper. I look forward to your comments and any questions you have. Thank you.
So, any questions or comments for George or Councillor Taylor? Councillor Shaw.
Thank you. Where was I going to start? Yeah, it was good to see some double yellow lines out and about. In fact, I parked today up in England Street. I noticed that they've done all the lines around there, so it's good to see. I was reading the report. Bulk of it's fine, got no objections to it. I just wanted clarification on one part of it, and this, I can't remember which document it is. I've just jumped straight to it on my PDF here. Page 7 or 49 of the reports pack. Rating to position of a vehicle, point 10 and 11. Point 11 seems to insinuate that if you don't have to park in a parking bay. So it says if parking bays are not marked out in a parking place, the driver of the vehicle should ensure that it is positioned so it does not obstruct the vehicles when using the parking place. Free flow of traffic circulating within the parking place and entrances and exits from the parking place. In such cases, the driver adhere to any instructions from an authorised officer. So it's sort of basically saying as long as you're not obstructing or blocking access, you can, as long as you've paid, you can park there. Am I reading that correctly?
Sorry, can I just double check? Is this the county's operation? So there's two large appendices. Thank you.
Sorry, I bookmarked it, so you have to forgive me. It's just jumped there. It's on page 49 of the reports pack. Which document that is? I will scroll up. It's District 100 Off-Street Parking Places Order 2025.
It's the first appendix, I believe.
Yes. Sorry.
Sorry, and that's page, within the actual CPE appendix, it's page
40.
Sorry, it should say page something of 15.
Page-
if it's-
page
Oh,
7
7
of
of 15,
15.
sorry, yes.
Sorry, I'm just trying to find them. I've got a couple of them open. And which section within it? Which point? Point 11. So position of a vehicle. If parking bays are not marked out in a parking place, the driver should ensure that it is in a position so it does not obstruct the flow of vehicles. So this relates to, obviously, most of our car parks have designated parking bays. We would expect drivers to park within those parking bays. This allows us for where we have sites that have less clear parking bays. For example, at Hinchinbrook Country Park, it's to suggest that drivers should park in a position so not to cause an obstruction, where you may not physically have a bay that's marked, but you do have access roads around Hinchinbrook. So it's suggesting to park correctly, not in a position to cause an obstruction, not blocking an access road, because not all sites, due to the surfacing, are actually suitable to be marked for bays.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. Councillor Alban.
Thank you, Chair. Very thorough on off-street parking, but apart from a reference to it earlier on in the report and some pictures look like screenshots from the highway code on page 158 onwards, unless I missed it, there's next to nothing about on-street parking, which is, I think, what most members are concerned about, and certainly a lot of my residents are concerned about in my ward. If you could fill in on that, please.
Absolutely. So the Cambridge... Thank you. So the document in there, which is the Appendix 2, which is the Cambridge County Council policy, is Cambridge's on-street policy. So as we're not the Highways Authority, we can't set the restrictions that are in place. What the County Council document does is comment on what is and isn't an offence, and it's made as operational guidance, so we will follow it. South Cams is the operational guidance that's followed for South Cambridgeshire, and it's the same guidance that's followed in Cambridge City as well. It does set out all the restrictions within there that are currently applicable to Cambridgeshire in the areas that we will enforce under on street, along with how effectively they are enforced. We are bound by this as it's Cambridge's Highways Enforcement document. There's obviously descriptions of what a taxi bay is. So these are the common restrictions you'd expect to see in Huntingdonshire. I think at some of our other briefings where we talked about CP in detail in the parish forums, we talked about how CP allows for enforcement of diplomatic bays, which we don't have in Huntingdonshire. So this is just a summary of what we are likely to see within our district area.
So can you provide an update as to where we are on the on-street parking, when that's going to come in? Will that be coterminous with the off-street parking? And when I emailed you and you were kind enough to reply about the streets years ago when this first came up, we had a list of streets in villages to where this would be applicable, and you explained to me that there were some things had changed since then. Is it possible for us to, as a panel, to have an update of the streets in our wards that are going to be affected, and when that will come into force, please?
Yes, sorry. So the agency agreement is obviously in place, and we're working through a number of the other items. We have sent the DFT application into, the application has gone to DFT to form a civil and enforcement area and special enforcement area. So I'm just skipping to the right point of the follow-up. So the report has gone through. We are likely at this minute in time, so the DFT have acknowledged they've received the application. They've asked us some initial questions about forming the special enforcement area and civil enforcement area. We are currently, the best guidance we have is that it's likely to go before Parliament in July so that we can go ahead and begin enforcement in August. So on-street enforcement is likely to commence in August, subject to any changes by the DFT. That's the best advice we have and the best comment back we have from DFT at the moment.
Thanks, that's useful. So a list of areas for members, not just of this panel, but I think members on the council, because what I think there continues to be good cross, almost unanimous support when this has come before for this to be rolled out. And we're keen as district councillors, I think all of us, to play our part in selling this to parish councils, but we need a clear idea of what is going to happen. So I can't think off the top of my head of any off-street parking in my ward, probably towards the north. Anyway, most of it is on-street parking, and I can think of plenty of pressure points in the villages in my ward, so it'd be really useful to explain. We'll take Stilton for as an example. The double yellow lines in Church Street near the junction, they'll be enforceable. The zigzag lines outside the school will be enforceable, but parking on the pavement is still a police matter. I think it's something that really sets it out in very clear parameters that we can share, please.
Yes, no problem. So there is going to be a portal that's accessible to members of the public as well as councillors. It's a system called Appyway. It's been rolled out by Cambridge County Council as the Highways Authority. That provides a map that members of the public, councillors, anyone is able to look at, and it will tell them where the restrictions currently are across Huntingdonshire. It's also been extended to South Cambs and Cambridge City, so County have rolled that out. So we are soon to have that website published, that County are publishing that, so I can share the link around and make that available once I know the link. But that will list all the restrictions on the map. You'll be able to zoom in, you'll be able to see the relevant TRO that's applicable and when it was made to the double yellow lines in your areas, and it'll list all the current restrictions which are therefore then enforceable by the District Council and the CPU. Sorry, that does exist, we just haven't, it's not been published by County yet.
Councillor Hassel.
Thank you, Chair. Just following on Councillor Alban's points there. So for those of us who aren't in the market towns, I think where people can and can't park, I think is actually quite important. So my question, which is sort of an addition to Councillor Alban's question, really is my understanding with CPE is you've got to have all the road markings absolutely up to snuff and the signage and so on and so forth. So in the areas, for example, around rural schools, et cetera, has County done the necessary in terms of updating all the signage and lines and so on and so forth in order to make what Councillor Alban was referring to feasible?
So the 5.3 just touches on remedial works. So the remedial works is something that under the agency agreement we discussed in the past, it was part 2 paper due to the financial element of it, and we were appointing a contractor at the time. HDC have funded the proportion of remedial works. So an assessment was undertaken to map all the restrictions in the district along with a quality assessment to understand whether they were fit for purpose. That includes signs and lines. That informed the specification. Last time when we spoke about this in April last year, we were tendering for a contractor at the time. A contractor has been appointed, and that contractor is currently undertaking all the works. So all restrictions that are enforceable under CPE, they will be mapped on the APIWay system and accessible for you to see what they are. And all works are being undertaken to make sure that they are to an enforceable standard as well prior to the go live of CPE.
So I'm kind of minded, I don't know how Councillor Alban feels about it, I'm kind of minded to make a recommendation, because although, I take your point that there is a website that people can go and look at, I think I'm sort of thinking that if it's possible, and it's not too much work from an officer's perspective, to actually provide each district councillor, the levels of enforcement they can expect in their particular, village or town or whatever, I think would be really helpful, because I think it just helps with the launch of this, so that everyone knows. I don't know, perhaps Councillor Alban might want to come back on that and see what you think.
I'm happy with that. Sorry, happy with that, Chair.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just trying to understand what Councillor Hassel means by level. I'm just trying to understand what you're asking for. Sorry, could you just elaborate on that? Maybe George.
Sorry, so when we brought the original paper forward a couple of years ago, we did have a expected level of visits, how frequently they would be visited in the different areas. So that still remains as it was when we originally brought the paper forwards. We have to tweak that ever so slightly because some of the restrictions no longer exist. It'll be broadly in line with the original business case that was presented, I think 3 years ago, which set out how the frequency of enforcement in various areas. We just need to check that the restrictions haven't changed. There's a couple of restrictions that have been removed, and there's a couple of extras added, but broadly it shouldn't change the level of enforcement that was originally put forward.
I guess it's always difficult. I think I'm going back and sort of thinking, if you're sitting in one of the non-market towns, I think just sort of sitting there and actually just giving parish councils what they can expect is that CPE has been around for a long time and it's been lauded as the solution to all of the traffic problems, and some of that may be true and some of that may not be. But I think actually just going back to the parish councils, each one at each ward, and actually saying, look, in your area, this is what you can expect. And obviously, if there is a level of enforcement, so that the parish council know what levers that they can actually pull, and which areas of their village are likely to be protected, where we have good quality lines and signs. So there may be some areas of particular villages that we haven't had enough money or resources in order to put the lines in. I think would be really helpful.
Thank you, Chair. I can't remember when it was, George will remember, I think it was last year sometime, we consulted with many towns and parishes. I think most of it was face-to-face. I don't know if there was some of it online, Eastfield House. And I think, as far as I know, because I sat in on one of them, and I think that was with Ramsey, parish clerk, and a few of the others that were with them, and the conversation, they understood what it was about, and they also understood that in later, once we've got this established and we understand the rounds, as George was saying, that there will be that opportunity for towns, parishes, and members to say, well, actually, there's a hotspot here. Could you go and look at that? Could you go and enforce that? And I think I'm hoping that engagement gave towns and the parishes that understanding of what's going to happen.
Yeah, so I think I'm a big fan of the project and everything you're doing. I think it's really important to say, look, this is any project, this is what we're going to do, this is what we've done. I think you need to sort of top and tail it, and actually just making that assumption that because we've had some consultation with parish councils some time back, and parish councils change regularly, there's lots of different staff, and just talking to the clerk is not sufficient. I guess what I'm saying is we should make a recommendation to just have a communication to each ward, just telling them exactly what to expect. I think that would be really helpful.
I can take that as an action. So just to check and understand, do you want to understand exactly what the expectation for parishes is, the frequency of visits that they can expect?
Yeah, so just imagine you're sitting in the parish. Whatever, you're sitting there, you're saying, what is it that I expect from CPE, from my village when it happens, and how do I interact, all those sort of things, just to finish the project off and make certain that you've actually categorically delivered.
That's absolutely fine. I can take that away as an action to look at when we could. I can't state when that will be published, but I can take that away as an action to state that we will publish that alongside the current enforceable restrictions and state what the expectation can be.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy for that as well, and also as well as engaging with the towns and parishes. We had the Towns and Parish Forum, and again we engaged there with them as well. So I think they know what's coming, but if you want that finer detail, and I think that's what you're asking for, Councillor Hassel, then George has said that he'll take that away.
Yeah, and thank you. I'm just saying you can never over communicate this stuff. Yeah, the more you do it, the more successful you're going to be. You've done the legwork. Just make certain you just push it over the line is what I'm saying.
And just a further perspective really on this, I think if we step back as to kind of why this activity is happening, it is because we want to make the roads as safe as they can and parking to be as safe as it can for individuals. That's why the lines are going down there. I think one part of that for me is obviously explaining the consequences and reasons for enforcement activity. That's one part of that. That's the kind of the hammer here. That's why one cause of activity here. The other thing for me is actually those lines are there for good reason. They're there to help people park safely. They'll be placed in the right places. I think the communication plan that we're putting forward is also around individuals' own responsibilities and accountabilities for where they park their car. It's not just about the District Council's enforcement activity, it is actually about individuals themselves recognising why that safety concern is being flagged up, and that's why people can and can't park in certain areas. So I think the comms plan that we'll put together will major both parts of that. It's not just the stick, it's the carrot as well, and explaining to people why this is a sensible choice for us to have made. So I'm sure the comms plan and activity will pick up on that broader piece. And I'd expect, and I'm sure that members will also be part of that communication activity to help people locally understand why that's happening. Thank you.
Councillor Bywater.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a declaration, I am a county council, just putting that on record, so because obviously the engagement with the county council. First of all, George, well done. This is a huge piece of work, and I think we all got to pay credit to you because it's been a long journey and you've put a lot of hard work into this, so thank you very much. I was going to talk on comm strategies and stuff like that, but I think you've answered that question, but it is really important. I do have, probably it's the cynical side of me, but I'm quite, I love your optimism on the timelines from when you're talking about statutory instruments coming from government, and so we'll see how that pans out. But, if this is delivered in August, then well done. And then just finally, I want to just pick up on a point, let me just find it. So it's page 39, 5.1.4, about the responsibility of, potentially handing back after the 12 months contract. And I dare mention these initials, LGR, local government reform, and how's that marrying up? Are we giving that any consideration? Because, it's going to complicate this matter, I suspect.
Yes, so not to, we obviously don't know the outcome of LGR at the minute. Local government reform is acknowledged within the agency agreement. It was acknowledged within the agency agreement we presented, and it comments that we'll work in the best interests of achieving the local government reform, however that looks and whatever that structure is. That was put in there. whatever happens, we will continue to look how we enforce, and we will continue to work with the best interest of LGR in place.
Thank you, Chair. On that point, I think, I mean, obviously we don't know, you know, what will look like in a few years' time, but certainly within Cambridgeshire, we've got South Cam City and ourselves with that civil parking enforcement, and I think the only two is Fenderland and East Cams that haven't. But yeah, not quite sure how it will look, but once it's in place and it cannot be undone.
Any other comments or questions?
Can I just confirm, Councillor Hassel, that you're that you're happy with the response that was given regarding the communications plan out, or did you want to add the additional or suggest to add the additional recommendation to the report?
I'll take the judgment of the rest of the committee really as to whether we need to make it a formal recommendation. I think it's always good for us to put a recommendation back to Cabinet to say, hey, we want a formal communication plan that goes out to each of the parish councils, yeah, basically top and tailing the project and making certain that the hard work that officers have done is actually absolutely definitely. And also, you're picking up on the previous point there that it gives us something to take to each of the parish councils so we can make this project even more successful. So I think it's worth making the Cabinet recommendation.
Councillor Bywater.
Yeah, I think that's wise.
Sorry, it's dropped off. Sorry.
It certainly feeds back to Cabinet and gets, you know, our views are made clear. Really, I think, you know, I think 3 or 4 of us have mentioned about the comms and that. I think that's important, really. And happy to second it if you propose it. Yeah.
So I've written some suggested wording of an additional recommendation to provide detail to each parish, to detail what they can expect under the new implementation of civil parking enforcement order. Are you happy with that wording as I suggested, or do you want to make any amendments to that?
No, I think that's broadly fine. You know, we could perhaps expand some of the detail because I think there were some really good points made in terms of the pros and cons and the benefits and the stick and carrot sort of angles. Which apologies, I can't think of the profound words to add to it, but I think that there's some good comments made. So I know Councillor Alban wanted to.
Councillor Alban, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. We did have a working group meeting on comms on this, and I think it might be useful for the other members of the panel to be, if they weren't already sent some of the notes from that and the suggestions. I know we looked at, when was that? It was a few months ago, wasn't it?
We did, it was a while ago.
Yeah, so I think comms, I feel reassured that comms is in hand, but I think it'd be good to have Councillor Hassel's recommendation put forward. And perhaps with added on to that, the panel expresses our thanks to the officers for the time and trouble this has gone. I think we're disappointed that it's late, but I would rather have it late and right than early and wrong.
Yeah. So is everyone happy with that recommendation? Yeah.
Are you happy with the wording that I've given you, or did you want to elaborate on it? Because I need to have that wording now before we take a vote on whether we're going to go forward on it. Because obviously we'll need to include it within the Cabinet report.
I think George and the officers, I think you understand what we want, and so I'm happy for it to go with that. Yeah, relatively simple.
So to
wording.
Confirm, so Councillor Hassel is proposing that recommendation and Councillor Bywater has seconded it. And could I just take a show of hands for all of those in favour of adding that to the Cabinet report? That's fine. Thank you very much. I'll add that in.
Thank you. Oh, Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. Just one more point that Councillor Alban's just said. I just want to clarify that the lateness was taken out of our hand. And as you know, it wasn't HDC or CCC. It is down to parliamentary time. So, and I'm sure you know that.
For clarity, Chair, it wasn't a criticism. It was just an acknowledgement of the time scale, and that, if anything, is probably why the officers need more thanks, because they've had to put more time and effort into it.
Any other comments? In that case, thank you, George and Councillor Taylor. So moving on to item 6, exclusion of the press and the public, to resolve that the public be excluded from the meeting because the business to be transacted contains exempt information relating to the financial and business affairs of any particular person, including the authority holding that information.